In this video, we're going to examine how to factor quadratics. And in this factoring quadratics, make a note that we are only looking at factoring quadratics if you have a leading coefficient of 1. And what that means is I'm going to have x squared. Now my leading coefficient is 1. And you're going to have plus or minus some term we'll call bx. And this scenario we're going to look at is when the last term is positive. So we're going to do a plus c. Now you could have a minus c as well, and we're going to focus on primarily the positive in these two examples. Now when you're factoring quadratics with a leading coefficient of 1, what happens is the last term is going to represent the product of the two factors, and the middle term, your b value, is going to represent the sum of the two factors. And so if we're taking a look at the last term being positive, that means, your product is going to be positive. There are two scenarios. What types of numbers multiply to give you a positive product? And that is either two positives or two negatives. And so let's examine further. So if you have a positive product, your factors are either going to be two plus signs or two minus signs inside of them. So what we have to examine next is the sum. If you have two positive numbers, then your sum is going to be positive. If you have two negative numbers, your sum is going to be negative for it. And so the way this helps us is, if I want to factor x squared minus 4x plus 4, my product is 4. And so I want two numbers that are factors of 4 that add up to give me my sum of negative 4. And in order for numbers to have a positive product and a negative sum, they both have to be negative. And so what numbers multiply to give you 4 and add to give you negative 4? And that's negative 2 and negative 2. And so to create the factors, you can break it down as in, how do you get x squared? And that's x times x. Your factors are minus 2, so you get x minus 2, x minus 2. And so the factor of x squared minus 4x plus 4 is x minus 2 times x minus 2, which if you notice, by the way, both of these are the exact same parentheses. They both are x minus 2. So you can even ask yourself, what does it mean to multiply something by itself? I'm multiplying x minus 2 by itself, so I'm actually squaring x minus 2. And so we can even learn here that if you have a square of a binomial, you'll actually end up with 3 terms. Let's try this one. I see here my product is 9. So I want two numbers that are factors of 9 that add up to give me 10. And so you notice it has a positive product and a positive sum. And so what that tells you is they have to both be plus signs. And so you're going to have x plus and x plus. And so what are factors of 9 that add up to 10? Well, it's not 3 and 3 because 3 plus 3 is 6, not 10. Well, what about 1 and 9? 1 plus 9 is 10, so that works out. And 1 times 9 is 9, so that works out. So my factors are x plus 1 and x plus 9. And I can rewrite this so it looks a little bit nicer so we can see it better. X plus 1 and x plus 9. And to check your answer, you could always distribute it out. You're going to get for your first term x times x, which is x squared. Your last term, 1 times 9, which is 9. And you're going to get 9x plus 1x, which is 10x. So you could always just apply this product and sum technique of your product is 4, your sum is -4, and you break it down to see what numbers multiplied give you +4, but add to give you -4. Same thing with the 9 and the 10. You could also look for the pattern. You notice how we said before, if their product is positive, then you're going to either have 2 plus signs, as we did here, or 2 minus signs. And you can break down the factors from there as well. And so let's look at, case number 2. And so I'm going to grab this and we're going to move on to the next case where the last term is negative for this. And so you can ask yourself, what type of numbers, if the last term is negative, that means your product is negative. And so what type of numbers have a negative product? And that's going to be, a positive times a negative gives you a negative product. A positive times a negative gives you a negative product. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what if you have a sum that's positive? Well, if you have a sum that's positive, then the positive one is going to be the larger number. If you have a sum that's negative, then the negative one is going to be the larger number. And again, that's just a pattern we can see. We can always apply our product and sum technique. And so if I have a product of -20, I want two numbers that are factors of -20 that add up to give me +8. And so I notice I have a negative product, which means one's going to be a negative and one's going to be a positive. But I have a positive sum. And so if I think about it, what numbers multiply to give me -20 and add to give me +8? I'm going to say 10 and -2. And the larger one has to be positive since you have a positive sum. And so your factors are x plus 10, a +10, and x minus 2, a -2. We can do the same thing with number 2. We have -27 as our product. We want factors of -27 with a sum of -6. So since I have a negative sum, the negative number has to be larger. And so I have my sum of -6. So what numbers multiply to give me -27, but add to give me -6? Now to think about that, I would see -9 plus 3 is -6, and -9 times 3 is -27. So my factors are y minus 9 and y plus 3. So again, look for the pattern. You have a negative product, so you see you have opposite signs on the inside. If you have a positive sum, the larger number is going to be positive. And if you have a negative sum, the negative number is going to be positive. So practice these factoring techniques some more with the idea that C is your product and B is your sum, and just make a note and remember this only applies when you have a leading coefficient of 1 where it's just an x squared. We will examine in future videos on how to factor if you do not have a leading coefficient of 1, if you have a number here, but this pattern of product and sum, breaking it down, works if you have x squared plus or minus bx plus or minus c for your quadratic